This week we're talking about two different populations. One is Arab and Muslim clients and one is Jewish clients. Let's get started. On chapter 19, the first page of the textbook, it gives, several of these little excerpts. And one of them is an example of Yusor Muhammad, who talks about being very proud and very blessed to be in America. And then an angry neighbor shoots her and her husband and her sister. And so I think it's this very kind of vivid imagery of someone who's very happy to be here, and yet because of, whatever was going on in terms of that neighbor maybe making stereotypes or assumptions or whatever it is, three individuals were killed. I find it really interesting that the textbook on page 384, it talks a lot about kind of these American values that are, by and large, according to the textbook, very consistent American values that are very consistent with Islamic values, such as this focus on family, on faith, on hard work, on an obligation to better oneself and better society. And those are very much values that a lot of Americans would say are important. So to me, it's really saying, instead of, an us versus them, it's highlighting how much that we all have in common. In terms of characteristics, Arab countries include the Middle East and Africa, so that's where individuals are immigrating from. Individuals tend to be, just kind of in general, highly educated, and of course, as with other populations that we've seen, they will immigrate to the U.S. for a variety of different reasons. There's several examples in the textbook specifically discussing either like economic issues or war. The family structure tends to be pretty traditional and patriarchal, but again, you see that from the picture here on the slide, there's a lot of different countries represented there, and so very similar to, say, some other populations and cultures that we've talked about, there's going to be this spectrum in terms of, when I say generally speaking, the structure tends to be traditional and patriarchal. Of course, there are going to be examples where it's not that. But generally speaking, men are the head of the house, women raise the children. This population tends to be similar to other populations that we've seen, very have a very strong cultural and religious value focus. So Muslim engage in rituals in terms of prayer 5 times a day, fasting during Ramadan. And I'll talk a little bit more about kind of the religious spectrum when I talk about the next population in a couple slides. Let's see what else to say about this. So this population also tends to be pretty collectivistic. So it was similar to other populations that we've seen. Asian cultures tend to be very collectivistic as well. So the success or failure of one individual reflects upon the whole family. And similar to a lot of populations that we've seen, seeking therapy can be seen as like kind of a last result, and is even considered shameful or might bring embarrassment on the family. Something to note is many Muslim women avoid physical contact with unrelated men, and women often wear the hijab, so the face covering. Like other populations that we've discussed, Arab individuals experience stereotypes, racism, discrimination, stereotypes in terms of, like, say, how they're portrayed in movies, often as barbarians or terrorists. They experience hate crimes, especially following September 11th, 2001. Men specifically might end up being profiled more frequently, especially at the airport. In general, individuals who might look Arabic or Muslim might be subjected to increased discrimination in terms of, like, vandalism, physical violence. But, the vast majority of Muslim people reject violence or extremism and express concerns over violence being used by extremist groups. There are several, kind of going back to religious values and holidays. There's Al-Hijra, so that's the Islamic New Year, which marks the end of Muhammad's journey from Mecca to Medina. There's Eid al-Adha, Festival of Sacrifice. So this is a 4-day holiday marking the sacrifice of Abraham. It also highlights the end of the annual pilgrimage to Mecca, so called Hajj. Prayers are held at the mosque, followed by an evening feast. There's Eid al-Fitr, end of the Muslim month of fasting, so that's the Ramadan. And it's a celebratory meal on the evening of this day. It is a 3-day celebration, and many will attend either early morning prayers, that type of thing. Ramadan, so this is the Muslim month of fasting. So Muslims fast from sunrise to sunset, with the last 10 days reserved for possible all-night prayer vigils. So of course that could end up impacting maybe someone's ability to attend work or go to work, or maybe they might be trying to schedule things around, this holiday. The Prophet's birthday, so this is a celebration of the birth of Prophet Muhammad, and celebrations include communal meals, discussing Islam, usually takes place throughout the day, that type of thing. And so it's interesting to me that, this is very similar to, us in the States. We've got holidays that are really important. Easter just passed. That was a really big day for some people. We've got holidays where we'll get together and celebrate and spend time with family. So yeah, there's a lot of overlap here, I think, kind of similar to what the textbook is saying in terms of values and that type of thing. Acculturation. So we've talked about acculturation with other populations. It's going to be very similar issues and concerns here as well. And that was discussed in the textbook, as well as, some people might struggle more, some people might take to it more naturally. Kids oftentimes tend to adapt more easily because they maybe aren't as used to, whatever country that they're coming from, whatever the cultural factors are, they might adapt more easily. So all of those things are going to be present with this population as well. Of course, depending on maybe when they're coming, why they're coming, how long they've been here, that type of thing. Some of those factors to consider. So I'm kind of keeping this lecture a little bit short because this is the last lecture where we'll have a documentary. And I kind of fell down a rabbit hole when I was creating this. I find this so fascinating. And you'll notice some of the cultural factors and some of the values that are at play in this video. I do think some of the commentary in this video is a bit over the top, and you might kind of notice that as whoever's narrating the video goes through. But this is going to be part of the discussion post. I'm really interested to hear or read what you guys have to say in terms of reactions to this video. So yeah, I'll put the link for this in the show notes. So I decided to take a slightly different approach to this week's lecture. And instead of incorporating a research article or something like that, I decided to pick a music video. I don't know what they're saying through most of this. If you click on the link in the video description, there are parts of the lyrics that are in English so that you have some idea of what they're saying. I could have used Google Translate or something like that. But watch this video. This is also part of this discussion post this week, so you've got a couple different options. But I wanted to just kind of spice things up, try something different. So yeah, enjoy the music video and pay attention to, what are you noticing in terms of maybe some of the cultural factors that are at play, or do you notice any of those in the video? So switching gears to working with Jewish clients, there are several characteristics to pay attention to. So I want to start off with religion because I think that this plays a role for both populations, but the textbook kind of discusses it a little bit more in depth for this population specifically. So there is a mix, and I would say that this is very similar to us in the U.S. as well. So there are individuals who are very traditional and follow religious rituals kind of very, to the T, very strictly. And so you would call those ultra-Orthodox Jews. So this might be to the extreme or to the extent of no working on Sabbath, or what they would call Sabbath, which is Saturday. And that might be to the extent of you can't push a button to say you can't push a button on the stove to turn on the oven to heat food, or you can't push an elevator button. And so individuals, if you schedule something on a Saturday, like say a wedding, and they have to, take an elevator or take, to get up to say a certain floor to be able to attend the, attend the wedding or something like that, they might not be able to make it, just because if they're, very kind of to the letter of their religion, they might not be able to break some of those rules. There's Orthodox Jews. So if this is kind of, this range, you've got like ultra Orthodox, then you've got Orthodox, which they're traditional, but they're a little bit less strict. Like they might say, okay, I'm going to heat up the oven for, and cook food or something on Saturday. And then there's what's called like more the conservative Judaism. So there's more flexibility in interpreting religious laws. And then there's what's called the textbook called it a progressive movement or Reformed Judaism, which advocates for more freedom of choice in terms of tradition. So, which kind of sounds to me like kind of this other end of the spectrum of like, choose what works for you, be flexible. If it doesn't work for you, then don't do it. So it's interesting that, there's kind of this range. And again, I said this, a couple sentences ago, that seems pretty similar to us here in the U.S. You've got individuals who go to church or go to, Baptist service or whatever service they're going to every week, every Sunday or every Saturday or whatever, whatever their religion requires. And then you have people who are like, hey, it's Easter, I'll go Easter, but I'm not going every week. So some similarities there. And I think that this is also reflected in, where is that person at in life? And I kind of like that this specifically, it has this range I think that does a good job of reflecting maybe that this might change depending on where someone is at in life. So for example, I don't know if this is similar for any of you. When you're a kid, your parents take you to church, but maybe as you grow older or get busier or you move out of the house, you might stop going. And then maybe as you get married or you have your own kids, you're like, oh, I should maybe start, going to church. I want my kids to be raised in the church. And then you start going back to church. That's just an example. And so, kind of depending on where someone is at in life, religion might be more important to them or less important. But this is, for individuals who do follow this very closely and are maybe on the more orthodox side of this, as with other populations that we've seen, religion often is, that additional support system, because you've got people in the church that you care about or that care about you. You have strong relationships. So that can be really helpful to have. Judaism, I don't know if I said this at the beginning, is the belief in the omnipotent God who created humankind. Some beliefs include observing the commandments, being immersed in a ritual bath, and for men being circumcised. And then holidays include Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. It's a day set aside to atone for sins from the past year. And then there's Rosh Hashanah, the start of the Jewish New Year. This represents the creation of the world. Even individuals who aren't religious will usually still gather with family to celebrate. Kind of like, if you're not super religious, you might still end up going to church for Easter. I keep bringing up Easter because it just happened. And not surprisingly, similar to other populations we've seen, this population is hesitant or can be hesitant to seek services. They might be worried about doing things that are against their religion. It's really important for us as therapists, if we're working with this population, to be considering or thinking about not scheduling things on holidays that if someone is really religious, they might be observing, because that might cause a conflict for them. And, so just being cognizant of that type of thing. Let's see, what else do I want to say about this population? It is something else to be considerate of or think about from us as a therapist standpoint is, our clients, if they are, especially if they're maybe more on the very consistent religious side, they might say, hey, I'm also talking to my rabbi. Are you comfortable with that? Are you okay with that? And for me as a therapist, I would say, yeah, it's good to get more than one opinion, or it's good to get, your rabbi might be able to speak more to maybe the religious side of things, whereas I'm, working with you from the therapy side of things. If a client says, hey, can you and my rabbi talk? I would say, yes, I'm more than happy to work as a team with your rabbi to make sure that we're on the same page and that we're providing the best care possible. So I think being open to that is important because, and I don't know how often that might happen, but, just prioritizing and highlighting, focusing on what are the client's needs. and being able to, from our end as therapists, adjust or move accordingly, as opposed to maybe kind of fitting into a very rigid box. Again, that's also going to be important to pay attention to. What are your values and what are your beliefs, and what's important for you as a therapist, and how do you, again, balance your needs, but also the client's needs, because there's two people in the space when you're doing therapy, you and the client. Stereotypes. So several stereotypes that this population might face is things like being hungry for wealth or hungry for power and control. They're often scapegoated during financial periods of financial distress. Something else specific to this population is that there might be this, and the textbook gives an example of this, where there might be people who don't think that the Holocaust actually happened, or think that it's a hoax or a scam. You might have people who are, maybe kids being teased at high school or that kind of thing, or where, other kids are bullying them and maybe drawing swastikas like on their locker or in the hallway or something like that. And so those are specific challenges that this population might face, and that are important to pay attention to and figure out how to address if those things are coming up. So, in keeping with spicing things up a little bit for this lecture, I threw in some Jewish music. Also, still don't know what is actually being said. This one is a little bit better, I think, maybe at putting some of the in the description. There's some stuff that's in English, so I kind of have a general idea of what the song is about. This is pretty, I don't know, I think it's pretty catchy. I found this very interesting video to watch. So, again, back to your discussion post. Well, let me just click because I think that's the next slide. All right, so discussion post. You guys have a couple different options here to choose from. I think I'm clearly a little biased. I think these questions are pretty interesting. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys have to say about this week's discussion post. That's it for this video. Again, I'm keeping it kind of on the short side because I do want you guys to watch that documentary if you choose to do that discussion post. Yeah, let me know what you guys think, and please let me know if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. Have a wonderful week.